Welcome to Postscript, Tom Jones. I'm Fred Vigent, along with Matt Wilson.
Hello, my friend. How are you?
I'm well, and you?
I'm great.
We are here to discuss episode 4, and what the heck happened here, Matt Wilson?
They had a few twists and turns left for us, I think.
Yes.
I made dumb jokes about needing a Glenn Beck-style whiteboard background episode 2 to figure out all the misdirections, and this was 10 times as bad.
Absolutely. And it was kind of a reunion of virtually every character introduced in the show.
Yes.
I think other than the one guy that Lady B was trying to fix Sophia up with.
Yeah,
he didn't show
Lord
up. But
Phelim or whatever. Who needs him?
Yeah, but everybody else is there.
Yes, including some we thought we had not seen since episode 1.
Yeah.
But it turns out we actually had.
Ooh, I see what you did.
Yeah, how about that?
I see what you did. So, and I was happy to see, my favorite scoundrel, Patrick Fitzpatrick, has returned.
Fitz is back.
Fitz is back. I figured you can't introduce a character like that and just to have him only in one episode.
No, I think he had a good purpose in life, which was to be the scoundrel of the show, perhaps. We'll see. We'll deal with that later. But yeah, it was nice to see him back just in a weird way. Kind of missed the guy. It gave Harriet and Mrs. Waters, we'll call her, a chance to bond a bit, which I think both of them may have needed. What a show this has been.
The only thing I could think of is maybe because this series was over 4 episodes that they jammed a lot into each episode because the twists and turns. Now we have a chance to watch this ahead of time since we're here discussing this with you now as the episode is being released publicly. So Producer Allie, I'm sorry, her first name is Producer Allie, Matt and I over lunch watched this episode, and I had watched it the day early. I cheated. I know, but I'm glad I did, and because I mentioned to you, that I was in tears at least 3 times during it. And I facetiously told you I was in tears when Patrick Fitzpatrick gets stabbed, but that was not
that was one of the moments?
That was not when I was actually tears of joy. But
no, I respect that. This is a farcical romance in a way. It's definitely a comedy, but especially in this 4th part, there were a few really touching moments.
Yeah.
I've said a couple times, I feel like in each episode, Tom has hit rock bottom. And I think we finally, given that it is episode 4 of 4, but we finally see that. To my memory, he doesn't make any real big goofs in episode 4. He has a couple moments where his, I think, self-awareness and remorse are front and center.
Yeah.
And certainly being locked up in prison, thinking you've done very horrible things, picturing now maybe the midpoint to 2/3 of the way through the episode before everything is clear to everybody. He is at the lowest of the low. But you see moments where he interacts with Black George, where he acts even with Blifil, for crying out loud.
Blifil! Let's talk about that. Well, we're talking about Black. Well, I will say really quick about Black George. That was a touching moment.
It was.
I thought that was a nice reconciliation between the two of them.
Closure to something that was bothering us a little bit.
Yeah, bothering us and bothering Black George, apparently.
Obviously, yeah. Said he hadn't slept well since and was happy to... Didn't really pay the money back. Couldn't, I would assume, but at least cleared his conscience about what happened, and Tom's response was beautiful. So,
yeah. But yeah, Blifil showing up in the jail, it was like, hey, I'm here to gloat and show you I won, end of story, with a big period on the end of that sentence, and say, so, see ya, dude.
Yeah, a little tap dancing on the grave. Couldn't resist, I'm sure. Right? The character Blifil said take every chance to beat on Tom.
Tom took the high road.
He did. Again, it was a beautiful response. He basically apologized. You didn't ask for me. I'm sure it must be hard. Didn't exactly ask for forgiveness, but in essence was saying, I'm sorry. And Blifil just effectively spit on him and turned out.
Yeah, I'm going to take what's rightfully mine. How is it rightfully his?
More of that line. Yeah, we could jump to the end just to maybe put a final nail in Blifil's coffin. How did he feel when he went running to Lady Bellaston?
I'm miserable. You're miserable. Let's be miserable together. That's
Yeah.
really what I surmised. I mean, during that time, that's when Sophia is doing a bit of narration, and she made the note that not everyone has a happy ending. I think that is a happy ending, to be honest, between the two of them. I think they're a perfect fit.
I couldn't think of two people more suited for each other.
I mean, I smell spinoff right there.
Interesting. Did they cue
The Lady B and Biffle show. I don't know.
The B&B show.
That's
you
how
heard it here
B&B
first,
starts. I don't know.
Masterpiece. Yeah, we'll take credit for that one. So Jenny Jones or Mrs. Flowers.
Yeah.
I this floored me. Did not see that coming. I thought it was done pretty well. I think we all felt the panic when things started to become clear, but we were left with a little bit of misdirection about the relationship and suspected that Tom and Mrs. Waters may have accidentally, unintentionally done something pretty scary. Just to lightly touch on that. But shortly after, they re-clarified everything that made it clear that did not happen. That was a good twist.
It was a good twist. I did not see it coming.
They set us up early to be more focused on who Tom's father was.
Right, which is still unresolved, and
Right.
maybe that's just for
Yep.
us to imagine.
Right. And I did not go back and watch episode 1, but I watched episode 4 a couple times. And even in episode 4, I noticed that at certain moments, they focus on Aunt Bridget visually, while off camera, someone is talking about Tom or how he's a bastard or how he's a worthless whatever, and her reactions. And I imagine if we go back and watch the early episodes, we're meant to infer that it's just from a adopted motherly kind of love, because she did care about Tom either way. But with the full knowledge of the relationship, I think we can reinterpret that as true pain because she wished she knew, or she wished he knew the truth.
Right, and Biffle made the point that he knew just through the affection that she would share to Tom.
Yeah, and I'm glad you mentioned that. Do you think he literally meant he knew? Like, I knew he was my birth brother or half brother? Or do you think it was, I think
he had
knew?
a suspicion.
Yeah, okay.
But I mean, how could he tell?
Right, yeah.
Legitimately.
I don't think he's that smart.
No.
Yeah.
No, he's too busy scheming with Lady
Right.
B.
So other lines of thought I've had throughout this is that Tom is conflicted with his head and his heart. I think his heart has generally been in the right place. His head gets him into a lot of trouble.
Right. I was worried he was going to have relations with yet a new woman.
There was another 52 minutes.
I was going to propose that being another segment.
Right.
Well, who did Tom find his way to this time?
Yeah.
But
there's even a part where Honor and Sophia are, I won't even say joking about that, but kind of gossiping about that. I think Sophia's like, was it 2 or 3 women just in the last few days, basically?
Right, and Honor was kind of downplaying it, like, could be worse.
She was trying to be a good friend, really, in ways. I like how that relationship grew. Mm-hmm. I'm glad she found what looks like true happiness in her own situation.
Yeah,
I was happy to see Honor end up in a good place. Do you feel that Tom's transformation was complete and true? Because remember, all of this happens in maybe a week, a couple days. There's a lot of overnight moments. Mm-hmm. It's unclear. Like, I don't know how long he was in jail, for example, after the stabbing. But do you feel like, how do you feel about Tom's transformation? Is it believable? Do you think he learned?
I think he learned. I think that was demonstrated in this episode, where there was a bit more maturity in his decision making, and a point you made earlier, self-awareness. And we saw glimmers of that in earlier episodes, but then other aspects of his mindset would get the better of him and maybe make poor decisions. Mm-hmm. But it seemed he kind of overcame that. I was surprised that Sophia, happily living ever after. We were certainly led to believe that was it. At least if they could be friends, I'd be happy with that. But I'm happy for them. I'm not, So I appreciate her forgiveness. to him over some of the poor choices he made in literally a week, if we think that is the timeline.
Yeah, regardless. I feel like maybe she let him off the hook a little too easily. I actually liked it's fiction, but I liked this sort of line where it's like, I'm going to watch you for a year and judge your conduct. And I kind of thought that was an interesting idea, and I would not have faulted her for sticking to that. What was nice is Tom seemed to accept that as well. He tried to defend that back to Squire Western. The lady chooses to wait a year.
And I think that was the test right there.
Could be, right. Just that simple.
She wanted to just see his reaction.
Right. Yeah, he didn't put up a fight. He didn't complain. He was like, yeah, I get it. I'm good with that. True commitment, perhaps. And yeah, maybe it's that simple. Maybe she was just looking for that response. She had a nice mini speech around, I don't think it was that moment. It was earlier. Maybe it was. But she said, I'm a Christian. I'm compelled to forgive you, and I do, but I can't forget.
Yeah.
I can't forget what happened in the last few days. And I thought that summed it up well, and I think from that perspective, and you see a lot of that. You see a lot of, from Allworthy to Tom to Sophia, that line of forgiveness, recognizing, we are going to make mistakes and bad choices. It doesn't necessarily make us bad people. It's what we do in response, how we react, how we learn and recover from that. And again, I do think Tom's transformation was a bit quick, but being put in prison and thinking you've done some of the things he thought he did, I think that could really change you. So I'm willing to say I believe it. I think it works. And again, I wouldn't have been upset if they did wait that year of probation or whatever, but let them be happy, for crying out loud, after everything they've been through. So, yeah. I would like to know where the Aunt Western of episodes 1 to 3 went and where this new Aunt Western came from for episode 4.
Yeah, and I was trying to remember what her actual name is. For some reason, is it always just been Aunt Western?
I think that's it in the credits as well.
Oh, okay,
I don't
Aunt
think
Western?
it's, yeah.
I was worried I forgot it, but
that's all I have.
I thought she had some of the best lines in the episode.
She was amazing.
Especially during the... well, I'm jumping ahead, but during the fight, she's like, men. And then, but also going back a little bit when she was quarreling with her brother, and that was, I thought she was a very complicated character in as much that she would be going along and in agreement with Squire Western, but perhaps in disagreement with the approach he would take on things. Like, obviously, she didn't care for Squire Western locking Sophia up in a room, but she did go along with thinking that Sophia should be with Blifil.
Yeah.
And she didn't. And it's unclear, as far as I'm aware, on her decision not to marry. She's, as far as we know, single. And Sophia brings that up, saying, "Well, why can't I be like you?"
Right.
Because in the first episode, I was curious if there was some other malicious intent there between Squire Western and Aunt Western on their intention to really kind of push the issue on getting Sophia married. I wasn't sure if they stood to benefit some financial reason. I don't know why, but it just the way it just seemed like they were almost kind of scheming.
Right.
But I mean, it's more of to keep the Western family going.
So. Yeah. The moment I think you're made me think of is toward the end of episode 1, where there's that real brief debate between the Allworthys and the Westerns about how this should play out. There was a moment in this episode where Aunt Western explains the difference. She said, I had my own money, and I was not the last of our family line. So she knew she was already settled, and her family would carry on regardless. And that's all the reason she gave, and maybe that's all she needs. So I think she did make it clear, how and where she saw differences between her situation and Sophia's. But even though it came out of nowhere, it feels like, I was really happy to see her change. I think maybe she finally found that compassion or understanding. She brokered a couple negotiations, in essence, between Sophia and Squire Western to let Blifil off the radar in Sophia's agreement to go along with, in essence, the next suitor that gets chosen, which is still not exactly what Sophia wanted, but at least it was a recognition, well, at least I can get out of this situation. There was a moment where Sophia, I think, really framed it well in referencing her, pursuit of freedom in her own mother's story, who was a slave and I think died in slavery. I think we can assume, or we were told that. And then herself was only granted her freedom at the death of her father, owner. She wanted that freedom. She wanted to, keep that sense of I can make my choices and have my own agency. So I get that it really struck her as difficult to be back in a situation where she's flat out just being told what to do. No loss of sympathy for that. A lot of funny moments again with Aunt Western. You said, I think already, just the little squabbles between her and she calls Squire Western a monster at one point, just flat out right in the middle of the house. And then just how she rides out through the end and actually becomes excited and happy for everybody. It was neat to see that change too. Yeah.
I felt the same way, kind of conflicted, challenged with Cousin Harriet. Like, I feel like there are different moments where she was going along with Lady B, and then there were moments where she was trying to undermine a situation that Lady B was instigating.
Yeah.
And I just was really having a hard time understanding, like, what team are you playing
right
here?
Like, we knew she was conflicted. She wrote a letter, I think in episode 3, one night when Tom was there. Do I remember? Oh, it was to her cousins. That's how the Westerns found out about all this. So that was her first point of trying to draw some attention to it. In episode 4, I think she finally recognizes the depravity, at the art show where the trap is basically laid for Tom. She tries to warn Tom, you shouldn't be here. This is not going to go well for you. I think she sees the depths to which Lady Bellaston will go in a revenge plot at that point. Tom hadn't really done anything particularly wrong, illegal wrong or anything. And then when Fitz became involved and she found out that Blifil, in essence, bribed him to, she set that straight quickly between her and Mrs. Waters and then realized, I think, this is just not anything I want to be part of anymore.
Yeah.
And you don't see her much. She is there when Blifil shows up to talk to Lady B ahead of the art show. That's when they plan the whole thing out. Right. But she gets kicked out of the room very quickly.
She gets shuffled out of the room. That's true.
Yeah. So I think she is happy to get out. And in the last scene at the wedding, she and I'll keep calling her Mrs. Waters, but Jenny Waters, Jenny Jones, seemed quite happy to have a different take on life finally. I don't think they miss London at all.
Disconnected from Patrick Fitzpatrick.
Patrick Fitzpatrick. Won't miss him at all. Interesting character that came up in episode 3 was Nightingale. He didn't have a huge part to play. He went with Tom to the masquerade in part 3, which led up to Tom meeting Lady Bellaston. Well, re-meeting her, because I guess he met at Aunt Harriet's. And then his big contribution, which I didn't like initially, and I still don't like, but immediately I thought this is a bad idea, was to write that letter to Lady Bellaston. His theory, actually, to his credit, proved to be true. She took it in the way he suspected. She's going to think you're after the money. She's going to reject this. And yes, Tom didn't have to marry her, but what it set up for was, of course, this whole revenge plot, So I don't think he was as clever as he thought he was. He certainly didn't make anything better necessarily.
I was confused about the storyline. Like, I thought he already was married.
In part 3. Yeah. There was definitely an interest there. I don't think they made it clear what the relationship was. But kind of seemed to come out of nowhere. But other little moments. Just, again, you see moments throughout part 4 where Tom... his heart shines. He does try it a couple times to put an end to the sword fight early, including when he has the sword in his hands. He tells Fitzpatrick, we could just stop this.
We don't have to do this.
Right before he charges a guy with a sword, which, whatever.
Right.
Fitz.
Well, and that's right after, Harriet throws an orange at
That's true. I forgot about
which
that.
was really funny. Because he turns around like, what? What are you doing?
Yep. Yeah. You see...
Well, are you going to gush about Partridge, your favorite
Partridge?
character?
I do like Partridge.
I know.
Partridge is forced into humility against his will. He wants to be back in that limelight. There's a great moment in part 4 here where he wants to go to the Allworthies and share the news about everything. And then the letter from Honor one-ups him. He's like, I was going to tell the same story. And then they all decide to go to London. And what's he get to do? Ride on the back like the servant, right? And look on his face of like, this is not what I had in mind. But he's critical to figuring all this out because he runs into Jenny Jones on his way in to see Tom and her way out at the jail.
Yes.
And he recognizes her immediately, and she doesn't. And what's interesting about this scene is that it appears to, you got to watch it carefully, it appears to confirm what we were afraid of. And if you look on Jenny Jones's face, she's starting to piece things together, but she knows the full truth.
True.
So she doesn't recognize, oh my goodness, I just slept with my son. She just recognizes that's the same Tom Jones.
Right.
And puts it all together. And I think the two of them are critical to sorting all this out. So I'm glad to see Partridge kind of end up part of the solution, even though it's nowhere near the part he probably wanted. Yeah, but he's been a fun character right along with. So that covers fun characters. We can certainly talk Scoundrel of the Week or even Scoundrel of the Show. Maybe that's too easy, but
well, I think there's both. Okay. So who's your
Scoundrel of the Week for part 4?
Yeah.
So honorable mentions. We're going to keep Tom off the list for once. I don't think he does anything super scoundrelly in part 4. You got Fitzpatrick, who gets bribed to instigate.
Right, and Tom was essentially defending himself.
He was set up, yeah. So I don't blame Tom for even tried to end the fight a couple of moments. But who was Fitzpatrick put up and paid by?
Bliffle.
You got Bliffle on the list.
He's on the list for sure.
But who was the real mastermind? It was Lady Bellaston. So I know we've used her, I suspect, before. I actually don't even remember who our full nominations had been for part 2 or 3. It was Fitz in part 2, I suspect.
Well, it was Mrs. Waters at one point, I think, right? Because she kind of encouraged.
Could be. Yeah. There are plenty of scoundrels to go around. Go back and rewatch the episodes if you want to remember what we said. But my vote, I think, just has to go to Lady Bellaston. She was spurned. She triggered the whole revenge plot. She got everybody else involved. She's absolutely the mastermind of all of that. And it's all very scoundrelly. But is there a counter argument to be made? Do you think somebody else rises to that level?
Just to be different, to be a contrarian, I'm going to go with Squire Western for the episode. Just because, I mean, he just has it in his head that this is how it's got to be. This is how I want it done. It's going to be my way or the highway. I know highways didn't exist then, but it's the same thing. But I mean, he just, arguing a lot with his sister, arguing a lot with Sophia, arguing at one point, I think, initially with Allworthy again before cooler heads prevailed. I think, I didn't care for the fact they kept locking Sophia up in a room.
That's not a bad
cool.
take. He's very consistent. He wants one thing and one thing only throughout the whole series. Well, 2 things. One is alcohol.
Yes.
2 is
lots of alcohol.
Is a appropriate suitor for his granddaughter. He continues to kind of lord over her. There's no excuse to be made for mistakes that were appropriate for the time.
Sure.
That we learn later as we evolve as a society that, maybe that wasn't as good as we thought it was. Real heroes rise above their time, right, and do good things and the right things regardless of what.
I would categorize Allworthy in that case.
Yeah, the contrast between the two is striking. They're both in the same situation. They're titled. They have land and property. They have wealth. What they do with it and how they react to things. Like Allworthy has always been, and there's some great moments in episode 4 too, where he's just a font of grace and forgiveness, generosity. He's a true gentleman. He has a great moment with Sophia toward the end of part 4 where they're talking.
Oh yeah,
it's a touching moment. And you see that compassion in him. And I fear that Squire Western maybe is too far gone, either mentally or again through drink, or just a different perspective. It may be just that simple, a different perspective on life. He has a funny line toward the end when they're debating that year probation. He said, "Well, I'll be dead in a year," which could be true. But Scoundrel of the Week, I won't fight you too much on it.
Okay.
Maybe not quite the level of Bellaston, but...
Well, I agree with Bellaston too, but like I said, just to throw a different name into the hat.
Which is fair. He didn't help much. Let's at least put it that way.
Yeah.
He had opportunities to help and be a hero and continued on his path.
So, Scoundrel of the series.
Some obvious answers, of course.
See, I would go with Fitzpatrick
Okay.
on that one, just because he shows up and just trouble follows him, or he instigates trouble wherever in episode 2.
Yep.
And then, as soon as he shows up in episode 4, you're like, this is not going to end well. Something's about to happen.
Right.
And he just, the last we see of him, he's struggling, he's in pain. He, thought he gained some cash, which, Harriet's like, that's all you want. It's just money. You don't care how you're going to get it.
Right.
So the love of his life, or loves of his life, walked out on him essentially. And now he's just left to sit there and think about his poor choices.
Yep. Counter argument. I think the obvious choice for me would be the younger Blifil. He's a consistent presence in all 4 parts. Truly rotten.
Yeah.
In every opportunity through all consistent experience, digging on Tom, claiming about what he deserves, what belongs to him, using terms like animal to describe Tom. I'm going to give him one out, though. He didn't know the truth.
Yeah.
And it doesn't excuse anything.
No, I mean, even in the early scene in season 1 when they're babies, as a baby, he's
already
Tom.
hitting on him, yeah. So I think I'll default giving Blifil a small pass, just because to me there's one more obvious answer, and maybe it's too obvious, but I would vote for Lady Bellaston as the scoundrel of the show. I think she is the adult that should have known better. Taken up by her own sense of power, and similar to maybe Blifil, feeling like she deserved certain things.
Yeah.
And just could not handle the rejection, and could not handle that look in the mirror of who she is and what she was doing.
See, speaking of her, that's why I wish this series was a few extra episodes. I feel like there's more to unpack with her. Learn more about her story. She's an interesting character. It would have been interesting to have some of the story center around her for a little bit. I know it's Tom Jones is the name of it.
Right.
Obviously, it's all about Tom Jones, but like there's this build up to her right at the end of episode 2, and then she is a kind of a focal point in episode 3, and then to some extent in 4. But I just feel like there could be more there.
Right. Yeah, I have no idea if they're going to do a spinoff. I don't know if the original novel or literature had more story.
Yeah.
Maybe there's an extension that wasn't touched on. I assume there were some artistic liberties taken to adapt that story to film, always, of course, just to fit it into time and everything else. I guess we'll just keep an eye out for Masterpiece and see if there's anything to come. I think this series was a success. I think a neat 4-part miniseries makes a lot of sense for a story like this.
Yeah.
We've mentioned a lot. There was touching moments, funny moments,
Scary moments,
a little bit of drama here and there. I think it was always pretty well done. Theories that I had that I was wrong about, just to be perfectly open. I had a theory that Sophia may have been the true hero of the story. Part 3, I think, talked me out of that because I felt greatly diminished. She was a true damsel in distress at that point. I did like to see her get a more active role and a little bit more agency back in Part 4. So I'm willing to go on the line and say that she shares the hero role with Tom. They both had a bit of a journey. Sophia gets what she was looking for, but I think there's far less transformation there.
Yeah.
I think her relationship with Honor grows a little bit. But we don't see any reason to think it was a bad relationship at first.
No.
But I think they develop more than just a lady and handmaiden or servant, maidservant was the official word that we caught in Part 4. It's almost on a friendship level, which I think is really cool. Tom transforms, and I think I'm happy for that for him. They both end up in a good place, which is great. But in the kind of the classic hero's journey model, I think Tom would take that role of someone that goes through fire and comes back a changed person. So I probably had other theories and ideas that were not wrong. That is fine. That's how this goes. One other thing I've liked to do is write on some of the voiceover and quotes throughout the episode. So maybe we'll start to wrap this up with a fairly long quote from the end of Part 4. This is, of course, Sophia talking over, I believe, the wedding ceremony or the wedding festivities. But I wish I could promise everyone a happy ending instead of the ending they deserve. But for all those of us who do make it back to the land, back to the light, and actually that's all the rest of us, for us the sun will shine on a magical wedding day, a day for new beginnings and new chapters. Just kind of an uplifting response to everything they went through. She continues, though, as for what story lies ahead for Mr. and Mrs. Thomas Jones, well, what do you think? Leaving it a little bit open. And so the past becomes a place we leave behind. New lives beginning, two families united. What secrets are abandoned? No, I'm sorry. Secrets are abandoned and blame is forgotten.
Yeah, and that they were focusing on Bridget.
Yes,
at that point.
Yeah, the nice cinematography tricks of focusing on the different characters throughout the voiceover to really hammer home what they're talking about. For at the end of all of our adventures, here begins the biggest adventure of all. So, well done.
Congratulations.
Yeah.
Congratulations, Matt.
Matt? What? I just read it.
Oh.
I didn't write any of it.
No, well, but you're analyzing all of this.
It's a good story. I'm happy for the fictional characters that we got to put a lot of emotional investment in for the last few hours. Happy to ride along with you, my friend. This was fun.
Absolutely. We're going to be making way for Miss Scarlet and the Duke coming up in this podcast momentarily.
Yeah, very soon. I believe, trivia, just as soon as this episode is posted, you, the listeners and viewers, may see a introduction of the next set of personalities that will pick up to address Miss Scarlet and the Duke through Postscript. Yep. So the usual caveats about Postscript, little details. Again, as Fred said, our time here is ending, but you can still send feedback. We'd love to have it. It'll help make future series even better. Email is great for that, ps@witf.org, or visit .org/postscript to find all sorts of information about the show. Social media, you'll find some stuff. Look for any place WTF social media appears, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. You can hit us up there. If you, again, want to watch us for whatever reason instead of listen, we are on the WTF Mosaic channel, your spot for all things arts, culture, lifestyle. It's a lot of great content there, including videos of the Postscript episodes.
And fun shorts.
And fun shorts of all kinds of things. I think that may about wrap things up.
That will. And if there is a season 2, probably Matt and I will be back in these chairs. And who knows, future shows we may come back. But yeah, we have other wonderful colleagues that will be taking you through other dramas in the meantime. And we appreciate your time and your company.
Thanks for riding along. See you next time.
Thanks.